Hi, I'm Mike Sibley, leader of the James Moore manufacturing team. Today, we're joined once again by Ed Marsh. Ed is a business management consultant who has founded and operated several businesses and as a principal of Concilium Global Business Advisors. He assists lower middle market industrial manufacturers with strategy and revenue growth. One of the drivers to increase the value of a business is not only revenue and revenue growth, but having a top sales team that delivers results, a diversified customer base, and as always, and we talk about this a lot, is having strong processes and methodologies, not only for operations and other parts of the business, but also for the sales team. And that's something we're going to discuss today, is building a second or third standard deviation sales team, which and what that even means. I was, it was something new to me. I haven't actually seen something put that way before, like that with a sales team, but I can't wait to get in that conversation. So Ed, thanks. Welcome back to the show, and glad to have you on here.
Well, thanks for having me back again, Mike. I mean, I think this is a really fun topic to talk about at this time of year, as we kind of in Q4, people are planning for next year, and this is a great time to think about. This is a big project, and it's not something you just do okay next week, but it's a good I think target for 2024 for companies.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I know companies are planning for next year, budgeting, thinking about strategy, putting all those pieces into place. So yeah, perfect time for that. And so, diving in, there's a lot to unfold here. And as you and I were discussing, we may not even be able to touch it all just because there's so much, but we'll do our best to kind of make some difference here. But let's jump right off the bat. What does it mean, a second or third standard deviation sales team?
Well, I'll drive my headlights in terms of statistics, but I mean, this is relatively simple. We all know what the bell curve looks like. There's average, and most of us in most areas of our lives are in the middle. I mean, that's the nature. That's kind of the human condition. So typically 68% of anyone in any area is within one standard deviation, kind of within that main distribution of the bell curve. Within 95% are within two standard deviations, and 99.7% within three standard deviations. So if you picture that bell curve, with better being on the right-hand side, as I look at it, left, I guess, for you, as you taper out toward the side, that's where you get that second and third standard deviation. So in other words, we're talking about top 5%, maybe even top 0.3%. So this isn't just kind of better than average. It's not good. It's excellent. It's superb. It's a really careful way to look at how we can get the right kind of talent. Another way to think about it is if you think of it in terms of a maturity model, where, okay, we've got a good sales team. They've gotten us where we are, but we used to have good manufacturing, and then we decided we wanted great manufacturing. So we put all these pieces in place, including, the ideas of continuous improvement and identifying problems, and then finding the root causes, and then engineering the process to address the root cause and to avoid rather than just detect mistakes going forward. And so we can, I believe, take that same mentality and apply it to sales. And sales, it tends to be thought of as a black box, and it's people, and people are unpredictable and all of that. But if we want to optimize our sales team and performance, then we really have to agree that we're going to begin to measure. And we're going to use tools to detect the root causes of sales problems and frustrations. We're going to improve the process. We're going to do those things that helped us in manufacturing and production and operations, and we're going to apply them to sales. So, I'd say most companies that I see have a current team that's okay. I mean, it's average. It's in the middle. There's some top performers, there's some bottom performers, but it's average. The point is it could be better. And so how can we optimize the current team? And what steps can we take? What tools can we use? What process can we incorporate so that the future team, if we think of this maturity model and continuous improvement, say, what's our sales team look, 2 or 3 years out? What can we begin to do today so that we've got that second or third standard deviation team in composition and performance when we get to that point, some a few years in the future?
Well, it's kind of funny, and that, I think of what is, the Good to Great, those books, good is the enemy of great, and those kind of things. And I think sometimes, perhaps, owners or CEOs may not necessarily understand what's going on in the sales process. They see sales going up, so that must be a good thing. But there's more to sales than just sales, right? That's the right type of customer, the profitability, the diversification, all of those different things that fall into it. So why do companies not treat the sales department or the sales team like other departments? Because you always see focuses on improving, everything from the finance department to the operations department. I don't see as much necessarily on the sales when those sales departments, when those discussions are happening.
And it's a great question, and I don't have a good answer for it. The best that I've come up with lots of conversations and lots of companies and watching this movie play out many times before is that it's just what's assumed is the way it's been. And it's actually not dissimilar to the attitude about manufacturing quality 20 years ago. People just kind of assumed that there was a stasis and that was the way it was. And only after getting poked and prodded and a lot of competitive pressure and buyer expectations did they evolve. And so I think it's kind of a similar situation with sales. Often executives have come through that function. So they think, geez, I did well. We had this system. It's gotten us where we are. It's probably okay. And, they may not be up for the change management that's involved in challenging some of it. And some of these privately held, closely held companies, it could be the brother-in-law who's been there for 30 years, who's a VP of sales. And that can make for an uncomfortable Thanksgiving, if you start to poke too hard at that bear.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that before. And I've actually seen some of the family dynamics in companies where they start butting heads and then they just kind of agree to do their own thing, and whatever happens, happens. And so, right. Yeah, that point definitely sticks home. So, when you're talking to your manufacturing clients and you're working with others, what are the kind of some of the common problems or symptoms? If I'm a CEO of a manufacturing company, I've got my sales team, whatever size that is, right. However, what are some of the things I might see as a symptom and saying, wait a second, maybe my team isn't that second or third standard deviation team that, maybe I thought they were. I thought they were doing a good job, but maybe they're just doing an okay job.
Yeah, I think there are several of them, and we can kind of run through a quick list. The interesting thing is that people just, again, accept them. Well, that's the nature of the beast. That's the way sales is. That's the way it is working with prospects and customers. And it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. Common things that you'll often hear about: discounting. How many times when companies go through a long sales cycle, get to the end of the sales process, then does somebody come back and say, okay, we want to do business with you, but we want a 17% discount. And salespeople freeze and they tend to comply. And often companies get frustrated and they say, geez, we got to do something about this discounting problem. So they get negotiation training. But negotiation training doesn't go back and fix the root cause of the problem. Other symptoms that you often see, there's a particular competitor that a company frequently loses deals to. There's a huge trend that I've seen over the last few years of more and more deals that just fade into no decision. They're not lost, but they're not won, and they just stay in the forecast, always going to close next quarter. And in the end, the prospect isn't doing anything because they can't overcome some of the kind of risk aversion on their end. Inaccurate forecasts drive every manufacturing firm that I know crazy. And in fact, they've got, in many cases, CRMs that have built-in reports, and somebody ignores that report, and they've got this complex process with Word documents to tell a narrative and spreadsheets to actually recast the forecast, instead of just having it accurate in the CRM so everyone sees the data consistently. And it takes a huge amount of time, and it causes friction often between production and planning folks and the sales folks, and it becomes almost a joke, and that's a shame. I think every company I talk to says we wish we had more projects. Every company I talk to says that we wish we had more meetings. I often hear them talking about how the sales cycle is too long. I'm sure you've got some that you've heard frequently. I'd love to hear what you hear from your clients. Those are common ones that I hear.
Yeah, I think some of it is you have right on with the whole pricing thing and how to deal with that. That's one of the top ones. A lot of times they may not even realize what they're working on. So you've got this potential, what does the pipeline even look like, and what's your close rates, and then sort of things just kind of fade off. Mm-hmm. And like you said, maybe you mentioned it pushing off, but they just literally fade away and go nowhere in it. And it's one of those things and then it's just the right type of customer. So there's those relationships aren't as strong as they should be. So you get an order in, it's great, that goes to the customer never pays.
Right.
Or you've got to follow up and you have those kind of difficulties there. So I think to some degree, at some companies, you just see some of the just lack of accountability on what they're supposed to produce, what they are producing, how they're doing it. Also, just again, kind of the right kind of projects that make sense for the manufacturing operation.
For sure. Defining the ICP, the ideal customer profile, defining the sales process. Many companies call their sales process, we get an inquiry, we do a quote, and then we hope to close it, as opposed to a real kind of classic professional tactical sales process. Often they don't have a good target account strategy. They may not have a formal adopted sales methodology. So all of these are ways that can be, things that can be focused on and improved that go back toward that root cause.
Well, the other thing that pops up quite often is, how are you mining your current customers for expanded opportunities? How do what are they feeding to your competition? Can you do better? Can you take on some of that? Because they're already a known quantity. They're already a customer that is paying on time. They're profitable. They know you do good work, all those kind of things. But what is your relationship with that customer to kind of take more of that, money share out of whatever's maybe going somewhere else? Or perhaps they're thinking about expanding into a new product line or something else, and say, hey, we've got capabilities to do this.
Right.
And that would match up perfectly with what we're doing or expanding or trying to do. So really understanding the strategic plan of your customers to see how you can build that. And now you've got, even more potential revenue growth without having to maybe do a whole new proposal with a company that may or may not know anything about you. So some of those things are often on the weaker side.
Of course, the flip side to that is concentration risk. And so if you concentrate too much on expanding in current customers and not going after new ones, then you got a problem. And so that's why many sales teams split between, the kind of outside sales rep getting new business versus an account manager cultivating the existing business. So they almost bifurcate it to make sure that everyone focuses on what they're supposed to be doing.
Right. So, so with that said, what are some things that, some manufacturers can do to, what are some steps they can take kind of to start moving down this road of improving their sales team?
So let's go to what's worked on the manufacturing side. First, we're going to benchmark. We're going to figure out where we stand. And with a sales team, that may feel hard to do, but it doesn't need to be. We can use some tools, an empirically accurate, scientifically based, sales evaluation tool that's actually built on working with millions of salespeople. So it's solid data. And something like that has a number of, it's got a number of embedded opportunities. First, there's obviously the opportunity to evaluate each person individually, and that means the sales leaders or VPs, the sales managers, the sales reps, inside salespeople, even customer service. That's an overlooked sales function in many manufacturers. Often technical sales engineers are another piece of it, and the marketing department. I mean, in a world where buyers are 70% of the way through their buying journey before they want to talk to a sales rep, marketing has to help sell. So we look at each of them individually, strengths and weaknesses, opportunities for training, see if everyone's in the right roles, give guidance to managers on how to best coach people. We can also, with that same tool, though, look at the company's systems and processes and understand, is the sales process clear? Is it followed by everybody? And various aspects like that of the company process. And it's really important, I think, to do all of this in the context of their market. If a company is an MRO supplier of fasteners, that's a very different sort of an environment than if they're building $1 million capital equipment that a typical prospect company will buy once every 10 years. Two very different kinds of sales transactions. And so you have to have a different scope of what you understand to represent the ideal salesperson in that case. And it's got to be an accurate tool. I've seen some that are, relatively inaccurate, and others which are, as much as 91% accurate and predictive. Mm-hmm. The interesting thing then is when you talk about some of those problems that we talked about with the sales team, is if you can take this insight, this measurement, this data, and overlay it on top of what you saw of the problems, then you can start to get to the root causes. So if it's discounting at the end of the deal, it's probably not because they're weak in negotiation. It's probably because they haven't established value early in the process. It's probably because they haven't understood the competitive pressures and how the decision is going to be made and all those other things that go into it. And so when you can get to that root cause, then you can, just like in manufacturing, you can create a remediation plan. You can create the sales equivalent of fixtures that will make sure that people do the same things the same way every time. With training and coaching, you can even figure out some people may be better in a technical sales role or in an outside sales role, for instance. And so you can help slot people into the roles where they'll be happier and more successful and contribute more to the success of the company.
Yeah, I think, what's interesting when you start talking about processes and things like that is, what made a company successful early on in their journey starting out may not be what will make you successful as technology changes, times change, people change, needs change, all of those kind of things. And so, oftentimes when we're helping to evaluate processes through finance operations, whatever we're doing, you hear a lot of, well, we've just always done it this way. So, before we ever suggest changes, we say, okay, let's find out, is there a reason we do it this way? Is there a good, solid reason? And if there is, then we say, okay, well, maybe we can incorporate. But if the reason is, well, we're just doing it because we've done it this way for 30 years. Okay, well, that's open game for doing something different, So
It brings to mind
really
the story of the mother and the daughter-in-law about cutting the legs off the turkey every year at Thanksgiving, and nobody knows why it happens. And you go back 3 generations, you found they had a smaller roasting pan at one point, and they had to cut the legs off. And now it's just the way it's done every Thanksgiving.
Right. No, I love it. It's a great family tradition, I guess, but no practical reason for it. So why add the extra steps or the confusion or whatever might be happening? So, so we've talked about processes and we've talked about, how to evaluate and things like that. But what about having the right people on the team and in the hiring process and looking at that? How does that fit into this evaluation of things? Obviously, on one hand, you never like to go into a process and say, hey, we might be getting rid of people. But on the other hand, you got to evaluate and say, do we have the right talent? Or maybe we need another talk about the hiring process and considerations there as well.
Yeah. So if you optimize your current team, then you've got a good sense of what gaps you have. You've got a sense of what potential you have for growth if you simply get the right training and right coaching and get the processes in place for the current team. But if nothing else, there's retirements, there's people with spouses that move and they have to move with them and they have to change jobs. And there are people that simply can't perform and they have to be replaced. So then we have to have a good solution for how we're going to recruit and hire. And I mean, the non-performance issue is one that's uncomfortable to talk about, but you mentioned earlier accountability. Accountability is a huge piece of making this work. And the reality is that across industries, the prediction is that this year only 68% of reps are, actually, no, I said that backwards. I think only 32% of reps are going to hit quota. 68% are going to miss quota this year. That's a huge number when you think about it. And in a long sales cycle, okay, you understand there's some variation from year to year in capital equipment cycles and that kind of stuff. But when 70% of your reps are missing quota, you've got a lot of very uncomfortable conversations with investors and bankers and all those kinds of folks. So we got to do it better. The problem is the tools that we often use for doing it aren't as accurate as we think they are. Resumes and traditional interviews are each only somewhere 18 to 20% roughly actually predictive of sales success. And so when we make hiring decisions based on that and kind of look at documents, believe what they say, fall in love with the candidate, have a good conversation, they went to our college, they're from our neighborhood, they have the same hobbies, whatever the case may be, we end up hiring people that often won't perform. And hiring mistakes are expensive, especially when you got long sales cycles. I mean, a hiring mistake will cost several $100,000. If you're paying a rep $100,000 a year, you've got a ramp up time. By the time you realize it's not working and make a decision, then you've got the time to find somebody else and ramp them up. You've got a territory that lies fallow. So it's much more expensive than we tend to think of it. What's the answer? In my experience, the answer is to treat recruiting like you do business prospecting. You have to recruit continuously, just like you would prospect for business. But the way companies traditionally recruit and interview is so labor intensive and so problematic that people don't want to do that. So we got to have, again, a good process for doing this. And the process, it involves a number of steps. I would say key ones. Number one, a great job posting. Too many companies write up a job description that's just a boring recitation of the activities, and they post that on the internet hoping that it's going to excite somebody. No, write a job posting, describe the ideal person so that the right person who's going to fit gets excited when they see it and they know that that's the job for them and they reach out. Secondly, use a sales candidate assessment, not a personality or behavioral assessment that are typically only about 22% predictive, but a sales candidate assessment that will determine with a high degree of accuracy and statistical validity who not only can sell, but who will sell. And if you do that, you do it early in the process, you're complying with EEOC, and you're only spending time on those who will actually produce in the end. So then you're looking for culture fit and other things. It's important to do a quick phone screening. You filter out a lot of people that way. And then an effective interview. And it's really important to use insights that come from that assessment so that you ask the really probing and important questions during that interview to really get a good sense of whether the person is the right person. Then, of course, proper reference checks and appropriate documents and solid expectations for people. And that means onboarding, not just getting somebody their health insurance form and
Right.
laptop, but 12 to 16 weeks of cultural and product and sales training. So it's definitely a process. One more thing I'd suggest is that companies often tend to fill sales manager roles by hiring the best rep. Take the best rep, bump them into a sales manager role, and that's often a mistake. It's really important to assess an internal candidate for that sales management role, because if you make a mistake there, you've got two problems. Number one, you've taken that production off the street. They're not selling anymore, they're sales managing. And number two, when you've given them that role, often ego means you can't unwind that. And if you've made a mistake, then you can't really replace them with somebody that's going to be a sales manager without losing them from the company. So that's a costly mistake to make.
No, you're absolutely right. And we usually look at it as, when you've got a person that, when dealing with turnover, especially the higher the level, you're dealing with at least a year's worth of salary in terms of cost.
Right.
And then, if you add on top of that, like you said, lost opportunities and other factors, you could be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars on a potentially bad hire. So that's a super important, thing to think about going through it and making sure. And you're right. Sometimes it's too quick of a decision. You find somebody, you like them, seem to have a good track record, bring them in, and then next thing you know, you're struggling with that person. So I totally agree with you there. Last thing I want to talk about just a bit before we wrap up here is just, you talked about coaching before and you've mentioned training a couple of times. Maybe, talk about, the importance of that in this process.
Yeah, I like to use the analogy of professional athletes, people at the pinnacle of their craft that still have coaches for every aspect of what they do, regardless of the sport. Somehow we've got this idea that we can hire salespeople and often just bring them in with whatever experience they have and consider that to be adequately trained, aside from some product familiarity. And that really misses. So sales training and coaching needs to address sales process. It needs to address methodology. You have to have a clear pipeline. So pipeline reviews against the qualification scorecard. Salespeople need to evolve and be coached differently. You mentioned earlier how times change. Buyers and markets evolve. People need consistent training. It's not just that first week when they join a company, but these lessons have to be reinforced, and we have to actually measure after somebody's trained and make sure that the impact of training is there. And of course, if we have these predictive tools and accurate tools, we can do that. It's not just on product. It's got to be on sales skills, tactical skills, strategic skills, target account management skills, all those kinds of things. And coaching really needs to be every day, even for superb reps. In fact, less qualified reps will often resent it, whereas superb reps will embrace it. Nobody likes the criticism in the moment, but good people like getting better. And so having the opportunity to brainstorm tough situations, to plan before calls, to role play what went well and what didn't go well, to do an after action review, to say, okay, I screwed that up this time. Let me process it and let me make sure I got it. So next time I don't. So I think that consistent coaching is important. What I know from looking at a lot of those benchmarking evaluations of industrial manufacturers is that coaching typically only happens, number one, as needed, which means relatively infrequently. And number two, it focuses almost exclusively on the topics of pricing and technical details of the product. So in other words, hey, help me figure out what's the right design or right solution for this and how much should we sell it for? And that completely misses, do you know who the buyers are in the buying team? Do you know how they're going to make the decision? Do you know how much is in their budget? How do they set the budget? What if it's not high enough? All of those kinds of things that are really part of coaching and pipeline review and qualification that can be done with role plays and planning end up missed. So it's a great opportunity. If companies only implemented that piece with good sales managers, in many cases, they'd see a huge improvement in performance.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And it's something that, I know even our own business, we're constantly working on our coaching and processes because, I think you hit it right on the head. Good people want to get better. Your great ones want to get better. They want to do better. They're going to take it. And the ones that are low performers often just want to come in, check a box and go and don't want that feedback. So, that alone is an indicator of, okay, well, let's see. So, this has been a fantastic conversation, a lot of information actually in here. So the good thing is we usually turn this into an article as well and kind of send that out because there's so many points that you covered. And, I think the bottom line is, you got to treat the sales department like every other department and work on the processes, work on the people, work on the functionality of it. So that way you can build from, being a good team, maybe to a great team. So Ed, I appreciate all your feedback, all your input on this and helping our manufacturers to think about how they can improve and certainly looking forward to having you on some future shows because we've got a lot more topics to cover in this area. So Ed, thank you for being on today.
Well, thank you, Mike. I look forward to future conversations. I've enjoyed this conversation. I really respect the way you and Kevin and the team take this approach where you understand that financial success and value creation for manufacturers is about more than just, the double entry accounting. There's a lot that goes into it. And you bringing this value to people, I think is wonderful. So thanks for including me.
Absolutely. And thank you. So thanks everyone for listening. And as always, if you have questions or feedback, you reach out to us. You can always reach out to Ed as well on these sales questions. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your day.
To learn more about James Moore & Company's manufacturing services, go to jmco.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our More on Manufacturing series to receive updates when new videos and podcasts are released. If you'd like to be a guest, or if there's a topic you'd like to see covered on a future episode, contact us on our website. You can also follow us on social media for more news as the landscape on manufacturing continues to rapidly evolve.